This young lady was strangled to death on her way to church by her boyfriend, all because she was tired of their relationship. She said she didn't want to date him anymore, and so because of that, he accosted her, dragged her to an uncompleted building where he beat her and eventually strangled her to death. When he was done, he threw her body into the bush very close to a septic tank. But that's not the strangest part of this story, because for 3 weeks her body remained unburied, laying in the bush in an environment where there were other buildings, residential buildings. For 3 weeks, people kept passing the uncompleted building, yet no one perceived anything. How does a dead body stay for 3 weeks in an open place and no one could notice? Could there have been more to her death? 24-year-old Precious Ikpikumi was a final year student of the Institute of Health Technology at the University of Benin Teaching Hospital. It was said she was set to graduate before the year runs out when this tragedy took place. Precious was dating 27-year-old John Ipo, a handyman who was into roofing. It's not stated if he was a student, but I doubt. And it was said their relationship only lasted for 4 years. However, Precious, saying that she wanted to graduate and move on to the next chapter of her new life, decided to end things with this guy, John Ipo. Although her reasons were not stated, but sources said that Precious was tired of the relationship with John because John was abusive. He was violent and a little bit manipulative. According to a close friend of Precious, the first time Precious tried to break up with him, that is within the 4 years of their relationship, it was said that John fainted. It was said that he collapsed after Precious ended things with him the first time. Neighbors had to resuscitate him, pour him water and wake him up, and he came back begging and throwing himself on the ground. And I guess Precious took him back because of how suicidal he was acting. Again, that was just him being manipulative, trying to get her to stay with him. Precious stayed, but his attitude and behavior did not change. He was still possessive and abusive. The second time Precious tried to break things up with him, he threatened her, swearing to hurt her or do something to her or make her regret leaving him. So basically, John just did not want Precious to go. Since he tried hurting himself the first time and that worked, of course he was not going to use that trick again. He then began threatening her. So basically, throughout the 4 years they were dating, they broke up over a couple of times. She had tried ending things with him, but every time she tried, he would threaten to do something stupid and that would make her remain in the relationship. However, early this year, she had enough. She broke things up with him and made it clear that she was ready for whatever he had in mind to do to her. She was ready for the consequences. She made it clear. Little did she know that the monster she dated was capable of everything she was afraid of. After Precious broke up with John for the final time, it was said she went on a low, that she went into hiding. Clearly, she knew what this guy was capable of. She unfriended him from Facebook, blocked his number, and basically avoided places that he would frequent. It's safe to say she was living in fear. Unfortunately for her, on the 1st of May 2022, on a Sunday, on her way to church, after leaving her apartment, her student apartment she shared with a roommate, John accosted her. Clearly, he knew the route she takes to church, and so he blocked her, positioned himself, and waited for her to pass. And when she passed, that was it. Precious met John for the first time since they broke up. Now, it's unclear how he managed to get her into the uncompleted building, but somehow from the street, they entered into this bushy uncompleted building. I personally don't think Precious would have done that in her right senses. Although in his confession, he claimed that, he begged her and they both agreed to go inside the uncompleted building to talk things out. That's what he said, but I don't believe him. I feel he threatened her, most possibly with a weapon, because it doesn't make sense that she would agree to go into that bushy uncompleted building with him just to talk things out. Now, it's unclear what truly happened inside this uncompleted building that led to the tragedy, but according to his confession, he was trying to get her back, trying to convince her, trying to apologize, and she kept refusing. And then they had an argument, and somewhere along the line of their argument, according to him, she hit her head on a wall and started bleeding from her face. That's according to him. He did not say he pushed her. He did not say he hit her. He just said she fell and hit her head. But that is not even the worst part of his confession. This is the worst confession I've ever heard. He then went on to say when she fell on the ground, she started bleeding from her head, from her face. He claimed he was confused, that he did not know what to do. Instead of running out of the uncompleted building to call for help, because where the uncompleted building is located, there are residential buildings around it. There are people there. It's like a student area. So there are residents there living around there, people passing the street. It was a Sunday, so people were clearly passing by. He could have found somebody to call for help. But you know what he did instead? head. He took off her scarf, the one she was tying on her head to go to church, and tied it around her neck, strangling her to death. That was what he said happened. How can someone you claimed you love be injured and bleeding, and the first thing that came to your mind was to strangle her to death? If this guy isn't a monster, then I don't know what is a monster. Which is why I don't believe him. I don't believe he begged her to come into that uncompleted building, and I don't think she did it with her own willingness. I don't think he came to meet her or block her at that street just so to talk to her and get her back. I don't believe so. I believe he wanted to kill her. The moment he came to block her there, that was what he had in mind. In his confession, he's trying to make it look like an accident that went out of hand. But it's obvious it was premeditated, because there's even a possibility that he came with formalin to conceal the decomposition of her body, because I don't know how else her body would be there in the bush for 3 weeks and no one could perceive anything. It's almost as if he also came with preservative or something to conceal the smell. He knew what he came there to do that day he came to block her there, and it was not to get her back but to kill her. And after he did what he did, he took her phone and ran away. For about 3 weeks, Precious was a missing person. Her roommates were looking for her, her landlord was looking for her, her parents were looking for her. Her phone number was ringing, but no one was picking it. At a point, it stopped ringing. So she was declared missing, and people started asking for her whereabouts. And obviously, they had a suspect to be the boyfriend. They felt that John might know something, and obviously trying to reach John seemed futile. That is how they know that John was also running and hiding, which clearly gave the impression that yes, of course, he knows something about her whereabouts. I guess her phone was traced, and eventually the phone was what led the police to wherever John was hiding. He was arrested and he confessed to the police, and he brought them to the uncompleted building to show them where he kept her body. He just threw the body in the bush. It wasn't like he buried the body. He just dumped it there and probably poured it some chemicals to prevent it from smelling. It's just unfortunate that this happened to her, all because she wanted to leave a relationship, all because she wanted to leave an abusive relationship, and the abuser still came to chase her, find her down and kill her. Now, as regard people not noticing that a body was there in that uncompleted building that wasn't even fenced, the police has not given us an explanation as to why she was there for 3 weeks and no one could notice. That is why I feel maybe he came with preservative to, preserve it and conceal the smell. It's not something that has been stated for a fact. So we don't know how she was there for 3 weeks without anyone noticing it, despite them being numerous buildings around and a busy street people pass by. So what could have been the reason why her body was there for 3 weeks without anyone noticing? What are the possibilities? Let me know what you think below. So we are just going to have to send prayers and love to her family and hope that they're able to bear the fortitude of their loss. It's not easy to send a child to school for this long only for someone to just take her life like that because she said she didn't want to do anything with the person. Why do some people think that they are entitled to the love of other people? Even if someone loves you, if they get tired to love you, let them go. Their love is not for you. You don't own someone because they are dating you. If they are tired of dating you, let them go and you move on. And this is a common thing among some groups of men. Why do people always feel that way? Why do they feel like if a woman leaves them, they have to go after the woman and attack them or kill them or hurt them just because a woman left you? Well, now John, you are in jail, and I do hope you remain there for as long as you live.